Hey everybody, Lonnie here. So this is part 2 of my Backyard Browser video series where we're creating a application, end-to-end application using OSIsoft Cloud Services, also known as OCS, collecting data from my weather station and then feeding that into OCS, pulling that out of OCS using an API, and then finally creating an Angular application on the front end to display all that information. So I'm looking for my backyard forecast and weather data exactly where I live, not someplace like over by the airport. All right, so let's review the architecture real quick and talk about what we're going to do in this part. So I'm looking at the weather station here, the ambient weather station. We're going to be writing this collector application, which is going to be in C# using Visual Studio 2019. We're going to make that a deployable Azure function that we'll be able to deploy to Azure and have that write data to the sequential data store in OSIsoft Cloud Services. So the first thing that we need to do is to get the data from this weather station and get that all ready to go, so then we can send it into the sequential data store. And that's what we'll be doing in this first part 2. All right, I'm going to go ahead and escape out of this and come over to my browser. This is my weather station right here. This is the WS2902A. I've had it in my backyard for, I don't know, about 6 months or so, and it's working really well. I'm very happy with it. It's very reliable. Seems like it's pretty accurate. And so Ambient Weather, the way that their weather station works is they actually pull it periodically through my Wi-Fi and send that into a database that they maintain. From that database, I was able to get an application key and an API and set up an API key. With those two keys, I can query the database with my and all the devices that are registered to my account will be returned, and then I can read data from those. So there's an API. I'm gonna move over to the Ambient Weather API, and in this API right here, I have it pulled up. There's a call here, this list user devices, and this will return all the devices with their current readings that are registered to me using my application API and my application key. So let me go ahead and grab those 2 items and we'll put them in and we'll do a test query just to make sure that we're getting the data. So my application key is right here, and my API key is right here. And I'm going to call this resource. And coming down here, I can see that there's an array here, and I just have my one weather station. This is the MAC ID, so I definitely know it's my weather station, and it's showing the current readings from that weather station that have been the last time that Ambient Weather database had read that data. And I have my time, and I have all the things, like temperature and rain and humidity and so forth. All right, so this is the call that I want to use. So I'll go ahead and copy this, and I think I'll just put it in the browser here, and we'll use this as a reference. So I just made that call again. Here's the data. I'm going to go ahead and start up Visual Studio 2019 and create a project. Now, you can use other versions of Visual Studio 2017 work fine, and you could even probably use VS Code if you wanted to. But we're going to be deploying this to Azure. So within Visual Studio 2019, that's going to make it really simple. So I'm going to create this project and set it up, and then it'll be it'll be super simple to publish it. So create a new project, and I want to use Azure Functions as a project type. And here we're going to call this Atmo. That's going to be the name of my the application, and we'll call this Services. And I want to put this to GitHub, and we'll put that into that directory. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and create a timer trigger for my first function. Okay, great. We have this. I'm going to rename this function to call this weather station collector. And collector, and here station collector. I'm going to go ahead and change this timer function to fire off every 3 seconds while we're doing testing, and then we'll reconfigure this before to deploy it. We'll probably have it like firing every 10 minutes or something like that. All right, let's go ahead and make this station right, and go ahead. Completed weather station right. All right, in here we want to we're gonna read the data from weather station. Data from, and what I'm going to do is organize a project, add a folder, and we'll call this our collectors, or we'll call this our data sources. Yeah, data sources. Within that, we'll create a class, and the class, we'll call this first class our ambient weather. So this class will be specific to all the ambient weather operations, and we're going to create another type of data source for our forecasting service later. Okay, within ambient weather, we need to bring in the API call and the application key and API key. So let's come back to our browser here. Let's grab this URL because it has pretty much all the information in it that we want. So let's copy that. And then we'll just do we're going to make this a public static class. And let's private. We're not going to make this accessible from outside of this class. It'll only be used within here. Private static string, and we'll call this our application key, and that'll be equal to our application key right here. Make sure to get that. And we'll do the same thing. API key. And the API key is right here. And then we're just going to set up our property. Well, we'll set up one more here. Base URL, and the base URL looks like this. So we're going to do more calls from here. This would set us up for being able to easily maintain that. All right. All right. The last thing I want to do here is set up a property that we can get our URL that we're gonna make the call that will put all this together. So this will be another static. We're gonna return a string, and this will be we'll just say the URL, and we'll put a get function in here, and the get function is going to return. We're gonna do this. We'll put in our base URL, and then we know that we have slash devices, and then we have our application key, and that's going to equal application key, and then we have our API key, and that's going to equal our API key. And finish that out. Okay, so this is going to return that, the URL to make the call. And now let's come back to our collector here, and we're gonna make the call. And what I want to do is set up a function here. We want to return the data, and so the data that we're going to return is a JObject. JObjects is part of the NewtonSoft JSON class. So our library, we're going to go ahead and get a reference to that. I just hit Control period there to bring that reference in. Let's make this static. And I'm going to make this asynchronous since we're going to be making an HTTP call. So we'll do async, and then we're going to return a task with this JObject here, and we'll call this get data async. Since async, we'll add that the async at the end of the method name by convention. We're going to bring in a reference for task so that we can get that in here. All right, so now we just need to get an HTTP client created and then make that call and then return the data. So let's put this inside of a try-catch block. And I'll put the exception. I'll do a EX here so I can put a breakpoint here if I need to. Let's put the breakpoint there for when we're ready to run it. Okay, within here, let's get our request URL, and that is going to be ambient. Now the ambient weather, I want to just make this a single namespace for this project because it's a small project, so just to save me a headache of having to always add that add a reference to that namespace into here. So, and then we'll go ahead and we'll get our URL, and then from here we'll use a using statement, and we'll do a HTTP client to HTTP. We need to bring in a reference to that, system.net HTTP. And once we have that, once we have our HTTP client, then we can go ahead and get our results, make the call. That's going to be an await function, and we'll call the HTTP client, and we're going to want to call the getString async, and we'll pass in the request. And from there, the last thing I want to do is, because we know this is coming back, if we look at our data, we see this is inside of an array here. And I really just want to grab this object. I don't want to have to mess with that array. We only have one weather station in this situation, so I'm just going to grab the first J object inside this J array using NewtonSoft. So to do that, we just we'll make our data object, and we have this J array. And we can do a parse function, and we can pass in the results. And then we want to pull out the first object of that, and that will return a J token. And so we just need to cast that to J object since we know it's a J object, and that will make this a J object, and then we can just return the data. Okay, let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Well, let's call it up here first. So we'll call data is going to equal, it's going to be, well, we can't await it here. This is not a asynchronous function, so we can't call, we can't do an await operation, but we can do our get data async, and then just call wait for the results to come back. I'm going to go ahead and run this. So it's compiling. Now it's starting this Azure Storage Emulator. I'll bring that over here. That's what this looks like. You can see what it's doing. And allow access. Okay. Okay, Lonnie. So down here we threw an exception and it says response status code and not unauthorized. So maybe we have a problem with our API key. Maybe I didn't copy that right. Let's go back and take a quick look here. Let's go ahead and take a look. API key, application key looks good. Probably V1. Let's see, HTTPS ambient weather v1/devices, and I have an extra slash here. Okay, let's go ahead and try running this one more time. Very picky, but it has to be perfect. Okay, we didn't throw an error that time, and we're reading in this weather station data right here, so that looks great. And this is a JObject. Okay, so the next part 3, we're going to take this data, get it in the proper format to be able to write it to OCS, and then we'll make our write. So thanks for watching. My name's Lonnie, and yeah, looking forward to doing the next part. Thanks. Bye-bye.